as a young teenager, she was inside of some kind of a craft or a round room. And what happens in very summarized for the radio broadcast tonight is that a praying mantis-looking creature, 8 foot tall, which does come up in lots of abductions, even if you don't hear about it much, appears, and at first she was terrified, and the tall praying mantis put into her mind a sense of deep sadness about her and all humans, and it was accompanied by a sense that this praying mantis was so ancient that it could be as old as our solar system, as incomprehensible as that is, and that these praying mantis are made, programmed to monitor the evolution of life in entire solar systems. We're getting into the world of Michio Kaku's theorizing about very advanced civilizations having this ability.
Yes.
And that when humans are in the presence of the praying mantis has the ability to calm the human's natural fear of the way they look. And what he did next, he took the young teenage Linda Porter to a round, small container, almost like a small room, and showed her all of this dense, yellow, sparkly light inside of it. And then, as if saying, this is one piece of what you need to understand, he walked her into a room nearby and said, watch. And now it's a gray type entity. We can get into the distinctions of gray androids that are robots and prime intelligence grays, and that there are all kinds. And now what she's seeing is what I would call more the prime intelligence in the gray category. They have vertical snake eyes. They have gray pebbly skin. Usually it looks slightly reptilian, and they are quite different from the 3 foot tall, we'll call them androids, that have the big black eyes and the pear-shaped heads and the little bodies. There's a big difference. So now she's in the presence of what appears to be a prime intelligence gray who walks over to a bed-like apparatus upon which there is lying a male human, and the gray reaches down, and Linda even asked me, could this be possible? Are they doing this in front of me like a hologram? Because this is what occurs. The gray's long 4 fingers just seem to pass through the man's chest. And out of the man's chest, the gray being comes up holding the man's heart and shows it, no blood, totally dry, shows it to Linda Porter, and she gets telepathic thoughts like this. It is important that the entity, and she gets the symbol or gets communication that when they say entity, they are meaning soul, spirit, the animus of life. That the man's entity and this particular container of the man's body, it's important that the soul remain inside of such a container for a longer period of time than the man's body is willing to give, because the man is dying of heart disease. And the gray communicates that they are letting this version of the man die, but over in a tube. And when there's a gesture, now she sees that there are these tubes that have various people in them, and one she recognizes in the tube, which has light above and light below, is a man who looks a little bit younger than the man on the table. And the gray being communicates telepathically to her, because it is important for the soul spirit, but he uses the word entity, to stay inside of this type of container, we are going to revivify him in this cloned body, in this tube that we can preserve and control. And we are going to put him in Australia, and in his home in the United States, he will die.
One of them was this idea, was there like this drone race of aliens involved? Is that your interpretation of it? And then if
Drone
they broke down,
race.
they
well,
were
during the mining process, there were clones,
right,
short clones that were used, and they were genetically engineered by this group of aliens that Dick Algar called praying mantis. This year was a praying mantis lady that he drew, and she was sort of a weird, nurturing type of personality, but in an odd way, because her task was to grow these fetuses. So you might call those drones, but I don't know if you'd call them extraterrestrials or just human weird type creatures.
And at the end, they were kind of just melted or something? Is that like when
they
they're
just
broken?
became defective and broken and just sort of discarded. You don't think of them as dying. You think of, if I'm from the extraterrestrial point of view, you think of them as just no longer working, no longer operating and becoming defective, and then off they go. And then you have to replace them with a new crop. But if they were humans that were doing it, they wouldn't have survived the mining at all, period. Full stop, end of story. So the mining would not have happened. So it wasn't like they were trying to protect humans because of the harsh environment. The humans simply couldn't have done it. So these clones were genetically engineered to be able to withstand the environment, but they could do it only for a certain amount of time. They couldn't do it for very long. Eventually they became defective as well, but they could do it longer than you or I could do it. And they did have some protection. See, sort of saran wrap masks that went around their face, form-fitting, that gave them some eye protection and breathing filtration. But still, that didn't stop them from falling off.
Okay. And another thing that I was wondering, did either of the viewers get an idea where these aliens may have come from?
No. And they were so shocked to come up with aliens in the first place because I never gave them alien targets. And they knew that some of our previous board of directors guys, the military guys, essentially prohibited alien targets, extraterrestrial targets. So they knew that we didn't do that. So when they suddenly came up with all types of alien, that's a weird question, because it's a very interesting question, because the whole pyramid project seems to have been associated with the development of a religion. And the people who were constructing it, the humans, had spirituality and religion on their minds all the time. That was like buzzing in their brains. And if you look at what they were actually doing, and you're realizing they were just piling up a pile of rocks, it really looks like it was, it's almost hard for me to say it, but it really looks like it was an inspired by somebody else idea. Like it was an artificial religion that was created and sort of instilled on people. But they definitely had the idea that they were trying to create some type of religious thing, to sort of make a statement to the world, to the universe, we are here, this is us. And then building these large piles of rocks. So after the second group of extraterrestrials came, all that collapsed, all that went away. And the people dispersed, and the Egyptian society as it was there just melted. It was no longer the way it was. And it was not done by violence. It wasn't done by spacecraft coming in and shooting off laser cannons or whatever like that. It was done by, well, at first they had to chase off the first group of extraterrestrials. That's implied, but it's not explicitly stated in the sessions. But the first group of extraterrestrials, obviously, that show that they were doing had to end, so they had to go somewhere. There's no evidence of a space battle. So I really wonder what happened to them. And then new ideas, this is very clear in the remote viewing data, new ideas were distributed, disseminated, and these new ideas changed everything. That's where these new ideas were really crucial in that regard. They simply modified the old slave-master relationship that was incorporated into that religion into something different. And, you know, I'm just sort of speculating, but it seems reasonable that the humans of those days probably thought of those extraterrestrials as gods and probably ended up writing about them as gods.
Well, we have all of the Egyptian, legends. I mean, their list of pharaohs going back.
Yeah, but those legends apparently were during the time of the first group of extraterrestrials. The second group of extraterrestrials seems to be following the Exodus period. So a lot of the biblical stuff that you see in the Old Testament seems to be related to the changes that occurred after the first group of extraterrestrials were chased off. That's my interpretation. Doesn't come out.
The extraterrestrials came in the New Kingdom?
What?
So the second group of extraterrestrials supposedly came during the New Kingdom period, which was like probably 3,000 years at least after the pyramids were built? 2,500?
We don't actually know how many years ago the pyramids were built. Remember,
that's true, but I mean, they're usually associated with the Old Kingdom. I mean, we have history after, we have the pyramid texts, and we have history after the pyramid texts. We have the intermediary periods, and we have the Middle Kingdom, and we have the New Kingdom. And the Exodus is generally considered to have taken place during the 18th or 19th dynasties, which would be great deal later, and basically into the historical period. I'm not saying there weren't aliens there, but it's too bad you couldn't have gotten any timing. I mean, I understand you had a lot of constraints, but that would have made this easier.
Yeah, no, it would have made it easier. But Disaster Cat, what we're really saying is that so much of what we've found here differs from the mainstream story of what happened, when, where, and how, that we don't know really anything about that actual process. The only thing that's coming through in these data, and it's me who's connecting it, not the remote viewing data, it's me who's connecting it to the Exodus period, because the remote viewing data are saying that you had the construction process, and then at the very end, the construction process stopped before all the pyramids were finished. Now that matches what we know on the ground. Some of the pyramids are not completed. And then that whole process stopped. This new group came in, new ideas, new information were disseminated, and the old Egyptian infrastructure just collapsed and people melted away. They left. And that old slave-master relationship ended. Now, then I say, well, that sounds an awful lot like the Exodus story. Now, I am not trying to create an exact timeline like you're trying to do, because I really can't do that. But I do agree with you. It would be nice to have.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the interesting thing is at the end of the Old Kingdom, which is traditionally when they believe the pyramids, when they, just like you said, they stop building them. They don't go back to building pyramids again that we know of, at least in Egypt. Things do kind of fall apart. There's what they call the first intermediary period. And so that actually fits, but it's like, I'd have to look it up. I meant to look at the dates up before the show, and I didn't get a chance. But like 1,500 years before the Exodus period, where we don't sadly have any actual recordings of the Exodus itself. That's why it's such a debate among scholars. But you have a highly literate civilization, and there are mentions of groups like the Abaru, which are possibly the Hebrew and things, and they're like a great deal later. But you are correct. There is a falling apart of this sort of first great Egyptian civilization. It almost falls into ruin, and then it reforms about 150, 200 years later. So that does happen.
Disaster Cat, you're raising exactly the type of great questions. Can you imagine what it would be like if these questions, spoken exactly the way you just said, were allowed in university settings?
I might still be in archaeology. Period of study is mainly physics. You might not know that there actually was this end of the Old Kingdom where things do just kind of fall apart.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
They just stop building. It's just that there's actually two of them. There's another one that comes later, but it's after the pyramids. And then after that second one is when they think they get the Exodus. I mean, no one knows for sure, but like I said, but you're correct in that things fall apart.
came up during the sessions.
Absolutely. In fact, the remote viewers clearly describe on video huge tunneling processes. It was, you know, when you see Dick Allgaier, for example, talk about the tunneling, almost like terraforming in the mining process. We haven't discovered all those tunnels yet, but there's good evidence that there's tunnels all over the place. And you find evidence of that when you do the sort of radar soundings. But what you lack is it's a very politically sensitive region, Egypt. And what we lack is permissions to dig, to uncover. Tunneling through solid rock, bedrock, is not something that we do easily today, but in those days, it was pretty easy. You just melted the stuff. Sessions. That's me connecting the dots and sort of saying, look at the scope of this project, the amount of death and suffering, and then a religion was born out of that. This is brainwashing. And if you look at the Atlantis stuff, the civilization in the Atlantis stuff doesn't look at all like this. It looks like us today. And then if you look at us today, we have skyscrapers. We don't build that type of architecture anymore. So it seems to me that the natural tendency of humans is to build the type of architecture that we have today, and it's not to build these pyramids. In fact, it's almost as if the pyramids were built so as to distract us from that other architecture, so as to make us so that we wouldn't remember who we are, where we came from, what cultures we came from, that our Atlantean or our current day civilizations would resemble. It's almost like they created a completely different type of civilization that would have no triggers to memories of something else. Again, this is me speculating, but that's how I'm drawing it. It's really weird. I know it's weird, but this is why it's so valuable to have these conversations, because we're allowing each other to disagree and to just guess.
Well, I'm going to have to stand up for the fact that there are all kinds of religions throughout history all over the planet, and they have very elaborate building complexes. And, you know, I mean, it's hard for us to relate to it, but religion probably was a much bigger deal in the world in the past than it is today in, let's say, the West. And so I think you have to.
Well, that's an assumption.
Yeah, but I mean, well, a minute ago you're saying we're having this speculative chat, and that's what I'm saying. As a speculation, I can say that, you know, I've been to places like Angkor Wat, or, you know, whatever. I've looked at documentaries in Burma where you've got, you know, hundreds of temples to the point where they practically bankrupted the country.
Yeah.
When the Mongols invaded, they left them because they left religious stuff there, and you've got just hundreds of these things, and you sit there, and all the legends say everyone went broke.
Yeah.
Because the religious temples didn't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just the nature of what people do. What about in the sessions we saw Dick Allgaier doing, like, it was shiny, and you know, the old story of the capstone having some kind of silver or
the
paint.
Pyramid doesn't look like a rough rocky thing. It looked like when it was finished, it was shiny, almost metallic, as if it was covered with something extra. And there had been theories that the pyramids, when they were finished, were in fact covered with something that was clearly not around today. It's been a long time since those things were defaced, but all the surface stones are gone. And I'm not just talking about the initial surface stones, but there might have been something on top of those that was valuable, and maybe with feldspar or something like that, that is just over the thousands of years walked off. But that's what Dick Allgaier seems to suggest, that when you looked at it, it was beautiful, bright, shiny, almost metallic type shiny. And it had a capstone type of thing, and energy waves seemed to come out of it that you could physically see. It's interesting type of stuff. I mean, it would have been a great
well, you know, Courtney, when we talk about energy, you know, like Dick's sessions with energy kind of coming out of it or whatever, that implies a purpose more than just religion, don't you think? That starts to say that
it's a show. That's how I see it. I mean, and he even described it as like a rock concert. I mean, do you build big pyramids like that with all the death and suffering to have a rock concert? I mean, whoever was inspired to do all this, that was a lot of effort to build these things. And really, it's a mystery. You and I are talking about it because it's a mystery, and that may be the only purpose, to create a mystery that has people scratching their heads. That may be the purpose. And if you have an extraterrestrial group that's doing this, and their sole purpose is to occupy the attention of the humans so that they don't develop in their own natural way, then you couldn't get a better plan to do that. I mean, I know you're getting it. You're trying to, it sounds like you're trying to come up.
But Courtney, what I'm saying is the 7 billion have changed.
Yes.
In other words, 20 years ago, out of the 7 billion, it would have taken them X number of hours to get tolerable in RV, and now it will take them 1/3 of the time. So it's the 7 billion have changed, not the numbers who are actually going through the classes, you know, at Farsight.
We're talking the same thing, and we're actually in total agreement. The only thing is, I'm thinking that when you're saying that it's easier for people to learn remote viewing now, I'm sort of thinking of a time in the near future which it will be way more easier for people to learn remote viewing, where kids will learn it and become really great at it. And it's that the improvements that you see in ease of teaching that you see now will be hardly even recognizable in the future when you see these vast changes. By the way, in the Atlantean civilization that we investigated in our previous project, that was only 70,000 years ago, and telepathy, remote viewing, mental perception was highly evolved in that society. That came clearly in those data. That remote viewing and telepathy, that was, you know, very much a part of daily life. And in our society today, that's all repressed. So,
well, Courtney, maybe the Great Pyramid was to suppress our psychic ability. Maybe some bad aliens came and did that.
It looks sort of something like that might have actually happened. It's weird, and I'm not saying I know for certain. I'm just saying these are the...
In charge of all mantis, and he's about 12 feet tall, and he has a throne, and he has 2 reptilian bodyguards. And when he's on the screen, when he talks to me, everyone else has to leave the room. No one else. And Mum here, Mum says to me, I've never even seen the Great One. I've never even seen the Great One. So everyone's ushered out of the room, and it's just me in this dentist's chair, and the screen, and the Great One. And the Great One talks to me and says, there's a task coming up. I accept you into the family. That's what he says. It said it was preordained that I would accept you, but the task is not fully known. If the task fails, all is lost. But he says to me, the light is strong in you, young one. You know, be brave. So he's the greatest, and he has an insignia. It's 12 inches long. It's like a cross, it's like a small cross, and there's a beautiful green gem, like a cabochon shape, beautiful green gem here, and 2 purple ones here. And when he leans through the screen, it's like 3D gone mad. It's just like real, as if he's just come out of the screen. He just leans out, and it's like he's really in front with you. He's not, but it's the technology that's projected. So that was a great honour, and I recognise him as my superior in rank terms, but not in life form terms, because we're all equal. Star system to star system, and he's just really going, and I'm saying, no, I'm not interested, but I'm being very, very careful. I'm not actually coming out and saying no, because of all the creatures, he scares the pants off me, because he's not got an ounce of humanity in him. He's not, these ones are really, these are quite, you know, there's a bit of spiritual in them, there's a bit of spirituality in them, but this isn't. So anyway, we agree to disagree, and basically he says, I'm going to hold the offer open to you. It will always be open, and he says, I will treat you as my son, except in one way: you cannot rise to the succession. You cannot succeed. And this was the very latest memory, because these memories, I find them unpleasant because these creatures are unpleasant. Compared to the others are loving. I mean, the other one, the mantid, I mean, I will hug it, I will hold it, and it will put its arms around me. And they've never rejected me. Now, he's never been nasty, but you know, it's not pleasant.
So what do you think then your relationship is now with these two very different races, let's say? Do you have an overview of?
Well, they're both working together. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. It's both part of a project. But I know for a fact that the mantids are playing a double game against the reptilians, because when I've been on the mantid mothership, I've said, this is spying on the Earth, isn't it? And Mantid Mum says, well, we're watching the Earth governments. That's what it says.
What are these motherships like?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
can you get a description?
Imagine a hammerhead shark. Imagine a profile of a hammerhead shark. Imagine that. And then inside you've got...
You mean the front section of a hammerhead shark?
Think of a long tube, and then that sort of front bit of the hammerhead.
Yeah.
And that's where the control rooms are there.
What sort of size?
I don't know.
Big?
Oh God, yeah, huge, absolutely huge. I mean, I've walked along the corridor where the control room is, and they're banked. Careful, Miles. They're banked, and you can sort of layers of control. So you've got 5 or 6.
So you've walked along the corridor?
Yeah, it's like, think of Concorde. You've got a narrow corridor, and then there's the cockpit at the end. So here what you're doing is you're walking along the corridor, but instead of a narrow cockpit, it's wide like this. And then you've got layers of people of mantids operating computers. So there's one layer here, and then there's another layer here. So they're tiered, and each layer's got his screen in front of him. And what Mum was saying is, yeah, you know, we're spying on the Earth government. And I should say that when they talk about the Earth government, they talk about America. To them, there is only one government of the Earth, and that's America. So when they talk about my government, they don't mean in Britain. They mean they say that America speaks for the world, as far as they're concerned.
And do they say what their concerns are, and do they voice those?
No, because that they know. All they'll say to me is, I say to him, because let me get it right. I say to him, spying on the Earth, and he says, yes, we share information. So that is with other with the reptiles particularly, we share information. And I say to him, but you don't share everything. And he touches my face and says, your family, you understand, i.e. we are not sharing everything that we know that's going on. So in effect, although they're all signed up to the same overall agenda, each group is playing its own game. And
what is the overall agenda?
The overall agenda will be to repopulate the Earth with hybrids. That's the agenda. To repopulate the Earth at a time when the Earth doesn't have very many humans on it.
Has that already begun?
It has, but it hasn't happened in a large way. And
are either of the different races, the mantids or the reptiles, involved with the governments on the ground at the coalface, face to face?
The only thing that they've told me is that they have, I don't know what you call it, like an intermediary. They have somebody who is an intermediary between them. I know what you're asking. I can't answer that because they've not told me that. But all they say is there is an intermediary. So if they wish, if there's a situation that occurs, rather than it going nuclear, for want of a better word, they have like the red phone. They have a method to get to that government very quickly through somebody who can carry the dialogue forward.
Would you know that if, just taking in mind the fact that you have a personal contract made, is there then a national contract, say, with the American people? Or
well, yes, that's why they yes, they've said to me that's why your government is the American government. We have the agreement with the American government. That's what they've said to me.
Oh, so they have a contract?
Oh, God, yeah. But they don't call it a contract.
Okay,
agreement.
An agreement.
We have an agreement with your government.
Is this an ancient agreement, or is
I don't know. No, all they've said is we have an agreement with your government. That government, America, speaks for the Earth.
So do we know what the agreement is from the American side?
I don't know, no. All I know is there's an agreement which is binding, both sides, and it allows them to do what they do. But within that contract, everybody is doing its own thing.
So when you say do what they do, are we specifically talking or referencing abductions?
Oh
and
God, yeah.
genetic
Oh,
work?
absolutely. Oh God,
Right,
yeah. It's part
okay.
of the deal.
Right,
Oh yeah,
okay.
because I've been on a ship where it's another ship. It's not the mothership, where all that mantids are doing. We call it timelines, human timelines. I don't know what the mantid word is, but in the English version would be human timelines. So when you abduct somebody, it's hugely complex. You have to get them at 13 seconds past, it has to be absolutely right. And I've got drawings here where I've been into a craft where there have been 8, 9, 10 mantids all working on computers, all calculating different people's timelines, and it's project management, because you're going to abduct this one in, say, California at 2 minutes past 2, and at 3 minutes past 2 you've got to be in Japan doing this, and they project manage it all out for weeks ahead. When I've had an experience where I hadn't seen Mum for 2 weeks, and I was really cross with him, and I said, why have you left it so long to come and see me? Because we see very regularly. And he says, I can't always come when you want me to. And often when they're doing their project management, something else will come up which is more important, so it has to be slotted in. So I've actually seen them working, and on the ship is 2 layers. They then send that information up from the bottom, from the ground floor if you like, to the next coordinators, and they're the ones then that authorize which individuals to go and work and abduct that person. So it's absolutely worked out weeks ahead.
So it's all about the genetics.
It's all about genetics, all about the souls. It's all about, well,
Tell us a bit about the souls.
The souls,
as far as you're aware.
as far as I'm aware, because I can only tell you what I know, what I've seen. Where they've had an association with a soul, it could be good or bad. So where it's a good association, they will work with that individual. So any individual that's getting a reasonably okay interaction, they're happy with that soul of that. They'll know that soul for many hundreds or thousands of years. Where they're not happy with that, that soul has fought against them at some point in history, in a different body, has worked against them, thwarted them. And when that soul manifests itself, they want to isolate that person and lock them out so they cannot then work against them.
Do they target specific elements of genetics? For example, Celtic has often been referenced in people who've been abducted. Often there's great
well, they've told me
preponderance of
Celtic, what we call Romany or Gypsy, and Jewish. And what they've said is,
and North American Indian, I've also
what they've said is,
well.
yes, because where the bloodline is not as diluted, where people have kept within their own groups, that's allowed them to be closest to the original humans. That's what they were looking for. When you widely, diversify, you lose that. But where groups have either religious or local customs that don't allow them to marry outside of that group, you are unintentionally or intentionally keeping it as pure as you can. So they come for that because those genetics were the genetics they worked with 2,000 years ago, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And you don't put the soul, what did Jesus say? You don't put new wine into old wine sacks because it will split it. And when you have a soul, depending on what its importance to them is, they will actually look, and they have there's some method of moving it into a body. So my soul will always manifest in a male. It will never manifest in a female. And they can track where that soul goes to. And then they might say, in 30 years' time, that person is going to be a real danger to us. So we've got to stop them now. Or they might say, that person's really important, we don't want to fall into the wrong hands, or what have you. And
do these two groups that also work with, are they controlled by a higher force?
I have seen an image shown to me of a pyramid, of a pyramid, of a pyramid, of a pyramid. These are fourth dimension beings. They're only just there. They're only just, they're not far away from us. They're just there. But there are other dimensions higher, and there are good and bad, and they're being manipulated, just as some of the human race has been manipulated. I've no doubt about it. But you know, they're into this power game. Some of them, not all of them, and of course they accept that.
So what is the goal then?
The goal is
hybridization.
The goal is to survive on the Earth. When the Earth makes the changes, you see.
So is there an interest then in living on the planet?
Yes, if they can. Yes, they want to experience our dimensionality. They want to be able to physically feel.
So would you go so far as to say that it might be a takeover, or was this a...
No, because they would have done that by now.
Right.
You know,
okay.
They would have done. They could have done it in the Stone Age.
Playing devil's advocate. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they're not allowed to do that because the law won't allow them. The greater law won't allow them. They've got to do it when they're either invited to do it, or the Earth is so depopulated that it doesn't matter anymore. And it's going to happen one way or the other, and they're just waiting their time.
You mentioned this Earth being depopulated. I mean, we've got the Georgia Guidestones and imminent destruction, reduction of the population. Are you referring to that? Do you have any information about
all I can tell you is that I have been told that there is some big traumatic times coming, but I personally am not to worry. What they've said to me is you will always be given food, you will always be given water. And I actually said to them, what will I do for company? Because if you're going to, not you kill her, but if all the human race is going to be got rid of, what will I do for company? And what they've turned to me and says, you already know that you're compatible with any female here. So when I meant company, I don't think I meant that. I think I meant friends.
Yes.
But they just immediately thought Adam and Eve, oh, company female. They've said to me there are traumatic times to come. But you see, it's positive as well, because my own belief from the little that I've picked up from them is that we as humans are going to be given a choice to either stay on this earth or spiritually evolve. And if enough of us want to spiritually evolve, this ain't going to happen. But if we don't, as a race, spiritually evolve and sort out our problems, then we are going to have some very difficult times.
And by spiritually evolving, if we're not going to be on the planet, does that mean we'll be in a parallel dimension?
Yes, I mean, it's not about spaceships landing necessarily and being loaded on them and carted off. Although that could happen, because it might be that a benign race might think, I don't like what's going on here, and offer people, but then you don't know whether that's a genuine offer or not.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm looking forward to would be the opportunity to embrace love, the opportunity to embrace a higher goodness, and to be able to say, right, I want to move on to whatever it might be the fifth dimension. I'm ready for that. I want to go.
How often do you have interactions with your people?
I'm writing a book at the moment.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, it's called 51 Years of Alien Abduction. I beg your pardon. It's called Alien Abduction, 51 Years of Extraterrestrial Contact. And at the moment, I'm being left alone. And they want me to write the book. Prior to that, I keep a calendar and I mark on it when it happens. So between 3 times and 5 times a month.
Okay.
Between 3 and 5 times a month. And then it might be that I'll get 2 or 3 very close together, and then a gap. And you know, they have come when my wife's been in the room. You know.
And when that happens, is she disturbed at all? She's not aware?
No, well, she goes into slow motion. What happens is that there's like a bubble that comes round, and she just immediately goes into slow motion, because they don't want her involved. So they freeze time. But I'm not put into slow motion because I'm the subject of the interaction. So she goes into very, very slow motion. Well, a good example will be when I open the dishwasher to take the pots out on that, and I touch them and say, oh, it's very hot. I'll